My sister was deceived by a married woman, losing both her money and her virtue, and ended up unexpectedly pregnant. She had no job and no savings. I advised her not to keep the baby, but she said she believed in God and absolutely couldn't abort the child, or it would be sinful and affect her luck. Yet after the child was born, she dumped him on me to raise while she went off to see the world. I spent half my life struggling to raise my nephew until he went to college. Then my sister came back. She told my nephew, "You don't know. Back then your aunt kept trying to convince me to abort you. Then after you were born, she hogged you all to herself. You're the precious baby I gave birth to. How could I not love you?" My nephew hated me bitterly because of this. He got into a car accident. I desperately pushed him out of the way and ended up being hit and thrown over 30 feet. As I lay dying, the dear nephew I had raised with such hardship cradled my broken body and sneered softly, "You almost prevented me from coming into this world, then kept me apart from my mom for so long, depriving me of maternal love since childhood. Your life and the compensation money can be your atonement." A white light engulfed me, taking me back to the day my sister Diana knocked on my door, her belly just starting to show her pregnancy. I opened my eyes to find my sister Diana sitting in front of me, sobbing as she asked, "Sam, you're all I have now. What do you think? Should I keep this baby or not?" I pulled a coin from my pocket and placed it in her hand. "Sis, don't you believe in God? He'll guide you to the right answer. Flip it." Diana stared at the coin in bewilderment, looking at me in disbelief. Based on her understanding of me, she expected that I would strongly advise her to terminate the pregnancy, but even if she insisted on keeping it, I would inevitably end up taking care of both her and the child. Once I became attached to the baby, she would exploit my guilt over initially suggesting an abortion to manipulate me into sacrificing everything for her. After all, this tactic had always worked for her in the past. Diana and I were only a year apart. Our parents passed away early, so we relied on relatives' support and my scholarships to get by since middle school. I knew that education was the only way to change our fate, so except for part-time jobs on weekends and holidays, I devoted every minute to studying. Hard work pays off. I consistently ranked at the top of my class and won numerous scholarships. This money was even enough to cover our daily living expenses. But Diana was different. She loved reading romance novels and always fantasized about being the Mary Sue heroine in those stories. She focused all her attention on boys, only going to school to scout for potential blue-chip stocks among her male classmates who might be worth investing in for the long term. By the time college entrance exams rolled around, knowing her grades weren't good enough for university and she could only get into a mediocre vocational school at best, her dreams of finding a campus blue chip were shattered. So she set her sights on falling for a domineering CEO and turned her attention to the real world instead. "Sam, with my grades, do you think there's any point in continuing school? I feel like I might as well start working and save some money." With core subject scores barely over 100 points combined, I judged from our living conditions at the time that there really wasn't much point in her continuing her education, so I simply said, "Okay," not realizing I would pay a steep price for that one word for the rest of my life. When she couldn't find a suitable job, she blamed me, saying if I had supported her continuing school, she would at least have a diploma. When she couldn't find a suitable man, she also blamed me, saying if I had supported her continuing school, she wouldn't be looked down upon by the guy's family for her low education level. Out of guilt, I supported her through my work-study program in college. To save money, I didn't even dare to date. Every holiday I worked multiple jobs like crazy, just so she could live a bit better while unemployed at home. It wasn't until later that I found out she was using the money I worked so hard to earn, along with loans, to buy designer goods and create a fake rich girl persona to attract men. She had pulled this kind of stunt countless times since we were young, posing tricky questions to set me up, then using emotional blackmail when I fell for it. Unfortunately, in my past life, I valued our blood ties too much and willingly let her control me. But after I died, as my soul floated in the air, I saw that the car accident was actually orchestrated by her and her son. They gambled that I would certainly sacrifice my life for the nephew I had raised with my own hands. They took my compensation money and occupied my house. Yet when they received my ashes, they immediately tossed the urn into the garbage. Everything from my past life flashed through my mind. The heartache and bone-deep hatred made me wish I could be reborn to tear them to pieces. Thankfully, heaven is just. My wish for rebirth came true. "Sis, why aren't you flipping it? Don't you believe in God?" Seeing she still hadn't reacted, I waved my hand in front of her face. She looked embarrassed and reluctantly picked up the coin, saying, "Fine then. God, please guide me. Heads I keep it, tails I don't." The coin flew into the air and landed on the table. "It's heads. God wants you to keep it, so go ahead and have the baby with confidence." Diana used to work at a jewelry store and had an affair with her married boss. That sly old fox brainwashed her into becoming religious. Then after she was hooked, he kept coming up with new religious items for her to buy and worship. Bronze statues, jade figurines, all kinds of amulets. Not only did she spend all her wages, she often borrowed money from me too. I say borrowed, but I was used to her never paying me back. Now that she was pregnant, that man said his wife had found out and told Diana to move out of the apartment he had rented for her immediately. But if I have the baby, neither of us will have anywhere to live. Diana's eyes greedily scanned the house I was currently living in, looking slightly pitiful as she spoke. This house was supposed to be the marital home for me and my boyfriend Kevin. In my past life, when Diana insisted on keeping the baby and had nowhere to go, she pulled out her usual emotional blackmail tactics to make me take her in. I was blind and foolish enough to agree, which led to a whole mess of trouble later on, ending in my untimely death. So this time, I had to nip it in the bud. That's easy to solve. Mom and Dad's old house is still empty. What a coincidence. Aunt Jong from next door called me the other day saying she opened a small convenience store and wants to hire someone to help run it. You can stay at the old house and help her mind the store. You'll earn money while being able to rest during your pregnancy. After you give birth, if it's a boy, won't that jewelry store boss welcome you back home like a goddess? Diana seemed to feel I was different from before. She looked at me with confusion in her eyes, but also seemed to think what I said made sense. To prevent her from overthinking it, I immediately called Aunt Jang to finalize the arrangement. Now we just had to wait for Kevin to get off work and drive her back. But I still feel... Diana was still hesitating. I quickly cut her off. Relax. Don't you think this is God's will? His arrangements always have a reason. Everything happens for the best. You just need to go along with it. After all, she used to brainwash me the same way in my past life. She caused chaos in my home with her pregnant belly, single-handedly ruining my relationship with Kevin's family. In the end, Kevin and I were forced to break up and move out, but he left the house to me. She patted my shoulder and said, "Don't worry. God's arrangements always have a reason. Everything happens for the best. He's telling you Kevin isn't right for you." The night Kevin moved out, she immediately occupied my master bedroom, claiming the guest room was too uncomfortable for her big belly. This time, I absolutely would not allow such things to happen. I refused to give up the man who loved me most in my past life, and the mother-in-law who treated me like her own daughter, for these two ungrateful wolves again. After sending Diana back to the old house, I immediately dragged Kevin to get our marriage license. Kevin held the certificate, staring at me blankly. "Honey, pinch me. Am I dreaming?" This fool, in my past life after breaking up with me, actually stayed single and never remarried. When he heard the news of my death, unable to find my grave, he took the only coat of mine left at his place and made a simple memorial for me. He would talk to it at the grave every day. I had been holding back my emotions while Diana was here, afraid of giving myself away. Now that she was gone, I hugged Kevin and burst into tears. "It's not you dreaming. I had a big dream, but thankfully I woke up." I briefly told Kevin about my rebirth. At first he didn't quite believe it. I told him the company would send him on a business trip to Guangzhou in a few days, and he must go no matter what. In my past life, Diana had only been living with us for a few days when Kevin's mom came to visit. Diana went through our bedroom drawers while we were out, and his mom caught her. They got into an argument. His mom held back since Diana was pregnant, but Diana kept pushing and ended up shoving her. His mom hit her head on the table corner. As a result, Kevin had to give up the business trip opportunity to another colleague to take care of his hospitalized mother. That colleague, who was inferior to Kevin in both seniority and ability, signed a multi-million-dollar contract on the trip and got promoted upon return. He ended up suppressing Kevin at work for the next 20 years, leaving Kevin depressed and unfulfilled in his career. Sure enough, on the third day after his mother came to stay with us this time, Kevin received notice to go on the Guangzhou business trip. This time, without Diana here, I got along great with his mom, so naturally there was nothing to interfere with his trip. Now Kevin fully believed my rebirth story. He had always listened to me when we were dating, and now he was even more attentive. To our surprise, just after we sent Kevin off to the airport, we saw Diana standing at our door with her luggage. "Sam, you're finally back."